Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Maindeck podcast. I am your host, Dan Green, and I am joined today by my good friend, Gabe Cavaliere of OnTheDrawGames. How's it going, Gabe?
Hey, it's going all right, Dan. How you doing? We're finally getting to meet, Like, we've been trying to make a meetup. Like, we've been trying to hit this segue point where we meet together, and it was like almost like an anime plot line where we're like, we're missing. We did it through the internet.
Every single time we tried to meet at Gen Con, it didn't happen. You tried to put together a podcast talking about Gen Con, and that was like scheduling a D&D game, and just no one could make it work.
Just have the open room, just like hanging out there, and you're just like waiting. You see somebody jump in, and you're like, oh, and then they disappear. It's like,
yeah, that was exactly what it was like. But yeah, I'm so glad we were able to make it work finally for this. This is a very special episode, of course. This is part of our Lookback Series. This is the 25th episode of the Maindeck podcast, which is, I don't know, like kind of a nice number, I guess. That's
nice
one where, that's a solid one of those multiples of 5 that you hear so much about. And it's also our 6th episode of our Lookback Series, the end of the year 2022. We are looking back at 8 different, basically kind of like what we consider 8 of the major trading card games out there. There are a couple that we aren't getting to cover, unfortunately, but it's just, I can only do so many podcasts in a month, guys.
So many card games that came out in the last, announcements, even near the end of the year with, Battle Spirits, One Piece. I know that Bandai announced another, anime-based card game. You can't get them all. You just can't.
Let me tell you, Gabe, as I've been doing this series, first of all, I've been having a lot of fun, so I hope people have been enjoying listening to the series, but I've also been thinking about, am I going to do this again next year, and how am I going to do this next year? So it's like, some of these games need to die or something. If I'm going to be able to do it
off, you got to set the fire going, we got to. Yeah, I mean, there have been, it feels like kind of near the end of the year, it feels like it's kind of turned to what the 90s was when it came to card games. In the beginning of the 90s, it just felt like there was, a random IP, new card game comes out. You were telling me about that football card game. What is it? It was called
NFL 5, baby.
Yeah, dude, Mr. Developer here. I never heard of it, and now Bandai's One Piece, and you're like, oh my God, this feels exactly like the 90s, where you're just hearing new card game after new card game. You got Disney Lorcana, you have Battle Spirits, which I think me and you have been cheesing over a little bit about.
I'm excited about Battle Spirits. We're going to be talking about that at the very end of the year. The whole the kind of the usual suspects main deck crew is going to come together. It's going to be like one of our old Metamaniacs show podcasts where we're going to have 4 people, and we're going to be talking just about 2023. And it's going to be a lot about these new games that are coming out, because you are totally right, and we've kind of hinted at this a little bit in some of the other episodes so far, the Lookback series, because it just can't help but have it come up. But we're a lot of people are kind of thinking that we're living in the second golden age of TCGs right now. The first one being exactly what you're talking about, the 90s there, where basically everybody looked at the success of Magic, and then some of the other, the secondary games at the time, Star Trek, Star Wars, CCG. Listeners, I fit it in again. There it is. And we're just throwing anything they could basically out there, just shotgun approach, and just trying to make games work. And if you were someone who just liked to explore trading cards and stuff, there was every other week there was a new card game being stocked at your store, and the stores had to stock them because they're like, well, what if it's Magic again?
They'll buy them. It's Magic, so they got to get them. It felt like when I was a little kid. This is the years when I was 11 years old, when I got suckered in through Yu-Gi-Oh. I was a big Yu Yu Hakusho player back in the day. That was the card game that really got me. And Score made a ton of great games, but felt like every time you look on a TV, one back here, and you're like, oh, here's a new show, new card game immediately coming out.
Case Closed TCG, Dragon Booster TCG.
Yeah, that's how I know you're a veteran, dude. I remember Case Closed. I played Dot Hack Sign, Decipher.
Yes, Dot Hack. Yeah. Dude, okay. So hang on. I really want to talk about this. I want to mention real quick, because I don't think I've said it yet. This episode today is for the Final Fantasy TCG. So once Gabe and I are done just going crazy, bantering over our golden years, our halcyon era of playing TCGs back then, We are going to be diving into the Final Fantasy TCG and how it's done in 2022, how 2022's been for it. But before that, Gabe, I have to tell you, Yu Yu Hakusho, I don't know why, but I just didn't watch it back then. So that game came out,
and my heart, I'm about to close my computer. I gotta go. No,
I've watched a bunch of it since then. I think we got distracted. There's this whole thing, this pandemic thing, and things just kind of like changed for us for a little while there. So we ended up getting distracted, but we watched into the second season, starting the Dark Tournament kind of stuff or whatever. So we were getting there, and I was vibing out. I do want to go back at some point and finish it, but I want to bring that up because that was the one game that that Score made that I regret not being a part of, because the mechanics for the game, looking back on it now, like later on, I've looked at it, like, were so interesting. That was a cool looking game.
Unique game. It was a very unique game. And I think that was like kind of the cool part, because you had, with a lot of these deck games, it's usually building a deck, fighting these monster kind of things. Like you had like these things. It was very much felt like its own kind of mechanic, kind of like a Netrunner a little bit. It felt like it was like in its own league of different like kind of mechanics, and it brought in different people. Now the anime was just absolutely amazing. That was probably that and Battle Spirits were like the two card games that really got me hype. And I have a funny story about Yu Yu Hakusho. I was 12 years old, still like kind of new, kind of, you're a young kid in the card store. You're like, oh, look at all these packs. And you're like blown away by everything. My dad hated me going to the card shop because he knew whenever I had my allowance, it would get blown on another card game that would just come. You remember those days? Like, you'd
100%. I was like, for Christmas, I'm like asking for card packs. I was like, no, we're not going to get you those.
No, you need a job. That's what you need. You need a job. And I'm like, no, I do not. Give me some cardboard with some pretty colors on it. And I remember when the cool thing about Score is they had a bunch of promotional materials. They gave you T-shirts. They gave you different kind of things as part of the tournament pack. So you get to become your own brand ambassador for the game, which is insane marketing in my opinion. But what really did it for me, I don't think I just was trying to hang out with my friends. We used to play cardboard at school, and then I went and learned all these other games. There was this one girl named Lisa and Dave. It was like a mother-son kind of duo. They both played Yu Yu Hakusho. And I remember for my birthday, I had nothing to do. My parents were like, oh, we should do something for your birthday. And I was like, I just want to go to the card shop. They brought me a Yu Yu Hakusho cake, and they gave it to me at Locals. And that is why I am now swimming in cardboard. Probably that's what got me my love of game, because it was like, man, it just got me so sucked in. And I just those memories, you can feel them coming back, all these old games coming back. It's very reminiscent, and it gets you excited. I think you're right. You said in other podcasts that this has been the golden era of TCGs. I think what different Pokemon and what that has done to exemplify not just Pokemon, but it's brought the value in the market, has actually brought a lot of eyes to TCGs, where you have games like MetaZoo, where you have people like Steve Aoki, who's this $1 million DJ, is sponsoring this very Neopets-esque card game. And I think that's kind of a beautiful thing. You know what I mean? We're the old heads of the hobby. Me and you get it. We were oh, I remember back in the day. These kids nowadays have all this digital card, which is great. Any type of exposure is just absolutely amazing. But it brings people back with the tabletop, the banter. This we wouldn't be able to have this if it wasn't for jamming games with the boys.
Yeah, and your cake story, is that really exemplifies what I personally. I always find that. When I'm just sitting at home and I'm I'm not out there at the community playing games and stuff. This happened during the pandemic. This is one of the big reasons why for a while Metamaniacs, which is what it was our name before I kind of made the push to change everything this year. For a while there, the pandemic happened and we were trying to keep up with it, but it just kind of languished. And it's that it's that excitement you're talking about when you get into the community and you engage with people like socially. And I think you and I were talking about this actually a little bit around like the whole Gen Con discussion too, because it was then going to Gen Con again back in, and I got to go to, for anyone who went to Gen Con 2021, that was the weirdest Gen Con ever. It was like, there was like, like a fraction of the people there. Everything was really strange, but it was also like really just this kind of like cozy, like, you just like, we had time for once. There weren't every TCG company wasn't there just running tournaments every single day of the week. I'm looking at you, Bandai and Jasco, both of you guys love to, oh my God. Yeah. But so like we played some games and like, we just screwed around, like my friends and I for like a few days, and like, I played so many just like random like commander matches against random people I've never met, and like it brings out that social aspect of TCGs, because the thing that I think is very different about the TCG hobby than things like even than things like the board game hobby and stuff. There definitely is a bunch of crossover there, but in a TCG hobby, you get invested in a single thing to the, like, it's sort of like as an obsession that you tend to get, because the TCG hobby like does have you, hunting for cards. It has you chasing down foil cards. It has you using creativity, building decks of your own kind and everything. And playing games with other people and kind of linking minds with people in some ways about like, what kind of game are we going to play? Are we playing casual games? Are we playing goofy games? Are we playing serious competitive stuff? And you just, in all these steps of the way, you're sort of investing part of yourself into that hobby, and to not get to spend time with other people doing that can cause you to really, I think, like pull back a little bit and you sort of miss out on that. And when you get to engage in it again, I found it just so exhilarating again, and it got me super excited, and that's when we came back with a vengeance.
It feels like you got a new haircut and you're just striding down the street after a long time of you have like a shrubbery hair with, you look like one of the guys from Lost, just like you haven't seen land or human beings in a while. You're talking to your coconut like your best friend, and you're like, I'm home. Like, this is like, and that's like such a thing. And me and you have talked about this before, with the last Gen Con, and like, for anybody who doesn't know, I've worked several conventions for other board games. I've done board game. I was an expeditioner for Asmodee this year. Like, the excitement of in-game play this year was absolutely insane. And like you said, like the year before, it felt really cozy, it felt really intimate, but like, bringing back that social aspect, like it felt like you were grasping during the pandemic, we were grasping for straws, like any type of interaction, like, let's play cockatrice for Magic, let's play the Pokemon TCG on here, let's play Octagon for Final Fantasy, like, and just to have that back, it's just like a big ramp up, a big, like, it feels, no wonder it feels like the Golden Age, because it's like, it's like you were really malnourished and we were like just trying to eat some type of
I don't know how. I've thought about this a whole bunch, obviously, because like, it affected what I was, my hobby pretty significantly, since I was getting so into this like content creation and stuff. But like, I for some reason never thought of it the way that you just framed it, where going into this year, these releases of all these card games, the excitement of Pokemon and everything, going into this, we started out almost in like a dead state, kind of like a cryogenically frozen state for a little bit. It's like, it's almost been like a rebirth, I think, for TCG players, just to like, it's like the hobby is new again.
Hasn't it felt more fresh for you too? Like, I feel like nowadays, like when I was like to a computer, we were kind of locked down, and now I'm just like jonesing. You know what I mean? I can't get enough. So like, I've been making it to every tournament that I'm able to. My big problem is just that I'm spending too much time doing this now. I don't get to play as much. But yeah, it's been. It has been a good year. The thing about a golden age, I feel like calling something a golden age is like the kind of thing you can do in like retrospect, unfortunately. It's like one of those things, like you don't know that you're in it for sure until like
you're no longer in it. You know, it's
It
like,
feels like the era of like when music came out, like you're living through the time of the Beatles and all these other musical bands, and you're like, oh, this band is cool. They're really making waves. And then you realize you were there for when the
yeah,
Beatles were playing. You were there when the Rolling Stones and Bruce Springsteen and, you know, all these huge bands, like, you know, and this might be like one of those eras for us, like the big impact where TCGs, like, you know, we always had this kind of mini space where there's a niche group and they know about it and your TCG players know about it, but we're getting new people into the hobby. You know, I think I think a lot of great things that came from the pandemic were the webcam games, were
mm,
the ability to still be remote and play. The online platforms also allowed that, but it gives two different kind of specters of people, or I guess aspects of people who do it. You have the people who enjoy the banter, have that interaction. Like I love the beer and pretzels portion of card games. Like I could hang out with
yes,
people after that, and that brings me there. But you also get people that like may not have the you know the money to buy it, and you have these programs, you know, some, you know, very low cost, or like if you're using Octagon, Cockatrice, you know, even Untap, like you have all these exposures to these free clients, and you're not doing anything. You're in your house, you know, trying to stay safe and, you know, protect you. You know, it allows for two layers of people to try do different ways, and then you see the conversion of the meeting, which I feel like we're at that point now. We're getting ready to actually see a whole bunch of new players just jump into the hobby, and that's what I feel like this overall the TCG community needed. I definitely see it at my locals. I see it for other games. Like we're just talking about it. Like me and you, I feel like we could like ramble on for hours about all these new things that sound super cool. I know you're super into Grand Archive. Like you got me into that. Um, you know, One Piece. There's just a bunch out there.
yeah, yeah. It really is. It's next year is going to be very hard to, I think, very hard to keep up with. I have a few games pegged as like the ones I'm most excited about, but it's going to be hard for me to not dabble in other things. I'm like, just given my position, I'm gonna have to try like everything out basically. But I can only commit like so much, you know, time and money to everything unless, you know, hey, we got a Patreon, so
Yeah, yeah. Support the Patreon. Support this beautiful man here. I'm telling you, I think one of the things that kind of happened throughout, like right before the pandemic hit, is I got very involved with my local game store. Shout
Mm,
outs to Mainline Chess and Games out in Paoli, Pennsylvania. They've been pretty much giving me the reign to even make orders for the store. So I'm even learning like the back end, like how to do all the
mm,
ordering and stuff. But in that same topic, it allows me to have access to some of the games, so I can call the rep and be like, hey, Mr. Rep, what are you getting
nice.
XYZ? And that's going to be a problem. So but I should get a Patreon so I can
Yeah, you're gonna need one. No, I and just to be clear too, actually, I just got done shipping a whole bunch of stuff. All my Patreon money has been like basically going to handing out giveaways and league rewards and everything for our wonderful community here. So I wish I could say that I was making the kind of bank where I could support the lifestyle of playing all these card games, but it's probably going to just involve me selling some more Magic cards to buy some more
That's
of those
always
things.
how it works. I sold my most of my Magic collection during the pandemic, and I swear to God that got me into more board games, that got me more Final Fantasy stuff, and hopefully now that things are opened up, it's like it's just going to be a new rebirth for different games. And you still got to show me My Hero Academia.
Yep, definitely. I definitely would like to. Hopefully we can meet in person at least at Next Gen Con, if not before. We'll have to make a point of it this
You
time.
got to do it. You said it live, guys. Everybody here live, like they heard
Everybody's heard
this.
it. I'm now accountable.
Yeah, you are now accountable. On the Draw Games has heard and recorded this entire conversation, and we will be expecting that.
So Gabe, I want you to because we've talked a whole lot here, and you've mentioned a little bit about your life, but I do want you to kind of talk to everyone here before we get too late and everyone's clicked away from the podcast about who you are and kind of what you're doing these days, especially with regards to your content creation and everything like that. So why don't you take the stage, talk about that?
Yeah. So I'll kind of jump here. So I've been playing Final Fantasy since Opus 2, which has been very close to like it's crazy to think it's like 10 years. I've been a traveling judge for the game for I was one of the first North America judges. Actually in there I was probably in the first 5. I've traveled to Canada to do some of the Crystal Cups in Boston, Toronto. I've been offered to do a bunch of community events and things like that. I've been playing the game for a long time. I've also hosted a lot of different tournaments locally. I played in a few tournaments. I played at Nationals the last year it was able to be in public. One of the things about the Final Fantasy community is we're a very small, tight-knit group. And, the game needs a lot of content. We're very small and few between. Right now, I do a lot of variety content, but I really focus my aim towards Pokemon and the Final Fantasy card game, because this community is really a small niche group, and the more people that can see the content, see stuff going on, and know about it, it brings more awareness. Like I said, we're coming into an era of lots of card games. So for anybody who knows me, I do a lot of variety content. I'm planning to work on a couple things on Final Fantasy. I'm working on a Discord league of my own for alternative formats, non-standard formats. I've been working with a group that's helping me get my Discord it's a little sloppy, I got to tell you. I have very little time in between, but I also do some video game content. I do a lot of Pokemon content. I've been playing a lot of expanded tournaments on Limitless. But my main focus is going to be Final Fantasy for 2023.
Awesome.
This game needs it.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing about the small TCGs, and like, so I think a lot of people get afraid of joining in and playing a smaller TCG because they have a history and a tendency of dying
out,
right? That's the thing that tends to happen. However, whether or not, basically here's always been my point of view about TCGs. Okay. I personally, I'm a TCG hobbyist, right? Meaning that like, I want to play TCGs. Which TCG isn't actually as important to me. In the moment, like I have preferences, of course. I have certain games that I prefer over if one of my TCGs that I like to play dies, I'm going to be sad. I'm going to, I won't like that, but I'm going to move to another one. I'm already playing another one and go, well, okay, I guess I'm going to keep playing this then instead. Not everyone has the luxury of being able to invest in several TCGs and
subscribe to the Patreon so he can continue.
No, that's not the point. That's not the point.
Come on, shameless plug.
But not everyone has that luxury, which I totally understand. But even if you don't have that luxury, even if you are left kind of holding bags at the end, which, we all are in that circumstance, and that, no one's super excited about that. But by the way, just generally hold on to your cards for a little longer. The people who dump right away tend to be kind of upset 5-10 years down the line when suddenly people are like collecting those old, like Yu Yu Hakusho cards. There are some valuable ones now.
Yeah, the dark one's like probably the more well-known ones. A lot of those like autograph cards. I mean, like we can talk about the Bleach TCG, get into the autograph cards. We can get into the raw deal where it's like you put a picture of some old wrestler that was like really popular. That's worth a lot of money. The old Z, Score Z, some of those cards are insane.
They've gone crazy, yeah. But like even outside of that, I think that when you play a smaller TCG, you actually there is something that you're getting that you don't get when you're playing games like Magic, Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh. That it's that smaller scene and that company which tends to be more invested in making player-focused decisions, I guess. When your player base is smaller, it's actually easier for the company to sort of tend to their needs more directly. The larger a game gets, the more diverse that audience becomes, and the harder it is, and the more painful some decisions become over other ones to more people, right? So the benefit of playing a game like Final Fantasy, even if, I don't think any of us are going to sit here and say like, yeah, Final Fantasy, it's on the path to the moon, right? Like, it's like Final Fantasy
links to the moon.
Final Fantasy games like some of the other ones we've gone over, like My Hero Academia and stuff. These are games that are like they're probably never going to become a big three game. If you're all about that happening, I apologize. My take on it is that's not likely, but actually my take on it is also I don't want them to be. I want these games to be successful enough to keep being printed, but I want them to, as long as the company is making a black number at the end of the day, and is not just losing money set after set, and they keep printing it, then you get to enjoy these benefits of having this tournament scene that you can break into. You can actually be someone in the community without, like, try to do that in Magic, man. Like, try.
Yeah. When you're playing against like 8,000 people at a GP, and to be numero uno, that's like a feat. Like that doesn't happen very often. And like when we look at Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh, you have that same kind of populace of like a couple thousand people to be number one. The cool thing about the small communities, and this is kind of something that I'd like to paint for a lot of people. Final Fantasy is one of the smaller community. A lot of the organized play, a lot of the competitive is really, the Square has done a lot to help out with that. But the community has been kind of one of those small niche groups that have been so kind, and they push their own money to push towards content. So it becomes the kind of interesting part about it is you can be somebody in those card games, but even putting effort towards that gets you some kind of notoriety, whatever that, you know what I mean? Like it's very interesting, because when I first started getting involved as in the Final Fantasy game, I remember I used to teach a ton of people how to play. And this is kind of how I got started in the whole, like, getting involved with judging and actually getting to work Gen Con and other things. I taught a kid named Casey Holmes, super nice guy. He played Pokemon. He played all these other games. I taught him how to play Final Fantasy. And I remember it was the first year that we had like legitimate organized play. And he was like, hey, I work for Cascade Games, and they're looking for judges for Final Fantasy. And you taught me 2 weeks ago, and this other guy who I just taught yesterday is going to be the judge. Do you want to judge? And I was like, oh God, we have two people that just learned the game.
Yeah, that sounds scary.
Yeah, it was a very scary, and you also got to look at it for me. Like, I'll be honest, when I played a lot of card games as a little kid, and I took a step out of that to run my own endeavors doing music. I was working at a bunch of concert venues, blah blah blah. But it was kind of scary because as a little kid, you're lucky to go to your mom and pop LGS store and just play games, and you're like, okay, you're going to be a person that people ask you questions for. But since I stepped up to the plate, I got opportunities to judge in other countries. I've gotten involved. I got to be able to talk to you. I get to be able to start creating my own content. I basically got a job at an LGS because of this game, and people know who I am from all the judging that I've done. So for anybody who gets afraid of these new card games and they're like, oh man, like it might not have a good lifespan, not only is the camaraderie, being somebody like winning like maybe a smaller event gets you some notoriety in that game, but even just showing your character in a positive way can really speak volumes of who you are and get you known. So for anybody that's afraid of jumping into the games, play the game, and if you like it, if you can create a community. I know it's harder than it seems to create your own. Everybody, I'll say in Pennsylvania, I've become a big community daddy because I think I taught more players how to beat me and beat me in bigger tournaments than I have top tournaments than anything. But it's given me so many opportunities to do things, and that's why I like doing content creation and just giving back in some way. It's the least I can do. And for anybody who's afraid, try out Final Fantasy, try out My Hero, there's like a plethora of new games coming out next year, and try it out.
Yes. Yeah. I totally agree. And Gabe, you and I are very alike because I am also here in my local area. I'm known as the guy who gets everyone else into card games.
You're the guy.
I'm the card game pusher. Yep. I'm the one who's
Warbucks has a little money in the wallet, and you see, I have a new pretty piece of cardboard for you to invest into.
Exactly. Yeah, but like you said, like I do it, and like my whole purpose here wasn't like By the way, I don't think there's anything wrong with getting into a game because you want to be known, you want notoriety at all. Because I think a lot of people just like would like that opportunity. I think generally, if you're a competitive player of a game, if you're here in this hobby, you're playing games competitively. There's part of you that wants that. It's hard to extract those from each other because that's like the purpose, right? You're like winning the game. Like there's some internal like I want to prove myself, but you also want to prove yourself to others, I think, also. And so there's nothing wrong with that at all. But beyond that, I just think that all these smaller card games, they have so much to offer, just in what you get to enjoy exploring mechanically, like in the rules and everything, and finding fun interactions. And like, I love also that you can get into a smaller card game and, especially one that hasn't had a digital client yet. And a true, like there's millions of people using this digital client kind of thing, because these games are a lot like games that aren't Magic, right now. Games 10 years ago, which is what Magic was 10 years ago, which is like, except that was of course way bigger, but like you could actually kind of discover, combos that people haven't really found, meta breaking things in these smaller card games so much easier. If you're gonna try and break the meta in Magic, you are competing against billions of games being played constantly, and like it's so much harder to like be the guy who finds the secret tech card that beats everybody.
I actually have a Final Fantasy story that would kind of relate to that. So
go for it.
Pre-pandemic, there was a re-raise event, or no, it was a Crystal Cup, and I think it was like maybe 5 or 6 years ago. There was a couple players within the Final Fantasy community that were ex-Magic players. One of them being Hunter Nance. And shout out to Hunter Nance, super nice dude. He actually just developed the game on Steam. It's getting like really big in Japan. Like there's like fan art inside. It's called Akira. Very weird plug. Anyway, nice. There was a monster card, and for anybody who's not familiar with the Final Fantasy card game, there's these monster card effects, and they work very similar to like enchantments. They're like artifact creatures essentially. Like some of them can turn into creatures, some of them have effects. There was a card called Death Machine. And Death Machine basically read like the old Magic the Gathering card Abyss. And originally, when I think one of the things that Final Fantasy would need, they've been working on it progressively, is how they translate it, how they do it. He found this crazy control, because how the card read originally is that at the end of each of your turn, if one player does not have any creatures, break Death Machine. But what happened was, in this tournament, he was able to just have another monster that when it would die, you would pay 2 CP, or for Magic people, it would be like 1 mana and let's say like water. You can put it back to the field dull. So he used this crazy little combo where he would just have this one creature out, and he would just eat their creatures. He would just control the board, kill all their stuff, and then he would just like, okay, before the end step, and for people who are unfamiliar, the end step triggers are very similar to Magic. You would have to have a creature on the board that would need to get sacked, and it would be this Earth card, Coretta, and it would just come back to the field. And then Hobby Japan, after this tournament, this guy Hunter placed 2nd place in this tournament. They did an entire errata to the card. They were like, this is not supposed to work like that. Like, Abyss was not what we were trying to create.
Yeah, those are the kind of stories that you get to actually make, in games like this, smaller games.
Oh yeah, Hunter is known for literally getting an entire card change.
I love that.
And it's like you gotta love that, and you can't do that in Magic. Like you can in some ways, but like these smaller games, you can be known for, you're the guy that broke this deck, and you make an impact. 1 and 2, it's just kind of like, for people who love deck building, like that's like the dream.
Yeah.
When you have a deck and you're the one to pilot it in such a weird way, and people are like I hate to say it, like when we go to these tournaments and you get into these rock paper scissors metas, like you talk about Pokemon and you're like, you're playing Lugia V-Star, you're playing Lost Zone, or you're playing like Duraludon or something like that, and it's like that. But if you can be that weird outlier that's like, what is that? Like, it's your name, you're now the guy that blew everybody away, and you can't get that. I feel like in other games. Would you agree with that, or what?
I agree totally, and for like our I think we have part of our audience played the Panini Dragon Ball Z game, the remake of the Score one, and anyone who followed that, again, a very tight knit, smaller community playing that game. But Tim Bateau was the name that you knew for that. Tim was I guess I would probably say a friend of a friend, ultimately, but he was this guy who always came with, everyone would say like, okay, the meta is Namekian Piccolo, and then if you want to beat that, there's this blue Ginyu deck that can manage to like keep the Dragon Balls under control, whatever. And he came to like the first regional he attended with this like off the wall orange Goku drill deck, and just like exoed the event, just like dominated everybody. Came back to the Gen Con regionals, and that one was the create a card one. If you won that one, you got to create a card for the game. And so he came to that one, and he brought this man. I will never forget the Saiyan Raditz deck. That was just like this. Like, this is at this point in the game. In Dragon Ball Z, there's 6 different styles you could play. 4 colors, and then Saiyan and Namekian. I don't know why. That's just how it is. Red, blue, orange, black, Saiyan, and Namekian. And then you built around a main personality. So he, at that point in the game, basically Black Krillin. That was the first guy. Black Krillin, Namekian Piccolo, Blue Ginyu. Those are the big decks. Orange Goku. Tim put that on the map. Then people were like, okay, so that's kind of like the meta. And then Saiyan was this just like, yeah, it's just not very good. It just, it can't, Piccolo outlives it. Krillin destroys the hand, and you can't do anything about it. And he came with Saiyan Raditz, and again, just crushes everybody by playing this dumpsters. He dumpsters him, playing this like combo deck where he's just searching out a mill card, and with like every turn, he's just like, and then Saiyan menace you, and you mill 8 cards,
like 20 cards, and it's your turn, and
then on his next turn he uses a little convoluted thing, brings it back, keeps doing it. He's like keeps like whatever, just like over and over again, and just like blocking and like turtling, and like, you're gonna die eventually. I'm just gonna keep draining your stages with this card and milling you. And like we, watching those games, I was there like judging, and no, actually I think I played in that one, and I lost, like bubbled out Top Cut, and then was watching him like, this is just like, how do you think of this kind of thing? I don't know. I've never had that kind of brain, but it's like, you get these stories that get to be created feel so much closer, because like really, there's so many fewer people competing to do that and playing these games and testing these things, where like it is completely possible to go in and you can be the meta all-star, you can go in and be the brains of a weird rogue deck, and you can go in and you can become a content creator or a judge, or you can just play the game and get to know the people and be like a cool guy, and like get to just like a cool guy or gal. Sorry, I'm really working on that, but you can be a cool person involved in the game. You don't even have to be good at these games, because you just like, I'm
not even good at these games.
Yeah, well, I'm not either.
I'm just like the goofy guy that judges sometimes and sometimes plays on my floor. That's it.
Yep.
I'm known legendary floor gamers.
It's the best place to play, baby.
Yeah, you gotta do it.
That's what's great though. Like when a community is smaller and tighter knit like that, it's just so much easier to just join in. And like you said, like you're talking about how friendly the Final Fantasy community is, absolutely true in my experience, as well as like being the case for many just of these smaller card games, where like there's just less. There's fewer toxic people because there's less people. It's like, it's actually like a good thing that there's less people in some ways, So like,
it's kind of weird, because you kind of look at the big three and it's not like there's any different from any group, but when you get such a big populace of people, you can get, you can just meet the wrong crowd. Maybe they don't mesh with your personality, and then your entire experience of that entire game is just thrashed. But like the cool thing about these smaller games, just like oh my god, Final Fantasy, My Hero Academia. We have like Flesh and Blood, we have like Soul Forge, we have bunch of these new
Keyforge
games.
too.
Keyforge is
Those
coming
aren't
back.
TCGs, but they're close.
They're close. They're almost like, and you get to experience like just some of the people that are in the group, and it becomes this like really tight knit family that really just you get known just from having a personality, just being somebody that can that can talk to others, because it's all like, I'll tell you, like some of my favorite memories of judging some of these tournaments have been like just being able to hang out with friends afterwards. One of the events that happened throughout this year, it was in North Carolina to by the RVA returners, and shout outs to them, by the way. They do a locals every Wednesday, and they've been really helping the online terrain for organized play during the pandemic. But my favorite moments was when we went to the tournament. Like, I was not prepped. I was just kind of not ready for it. I got a ticket very, very late, and I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna drive 8 hours for, like front and back, which was, when you hear like, oh, that's not that bad. 8 hours is not as bad. And then you're on the road and my car doesn't have cruise control and I'm driving. I'm like, oh my God, after hour 4, it's
Oh, no.
how much farther. There's an accident on the road and you're like, oh my God. But my favorite moment of that entire tournament, it was not only just being able to go and eat with some of the people afterwards. We went to a local sushi place, which was super fun. We got to play a bunch of different board games at our friend's house. We played like Marvel Splendor. One of the guys, Brian Garrity, he brought a cube, and we all got to play his cube, like it's like the All-Stars cube that Square Enix puts on the website. And that they were planning to use for organized play for big tournaments. And they did, and then the pandemic, it kind of slowed that down. But, my favorite moments was just hanging out with them, just playing different games, enjoying other games. And we got exposed to different games because they had One Piece decks on them. They had Flesh and Blood decks on them. A lot of people, we're playing My Hero Academia. Like, that's kind of the cool thing, this camaraderie of small groups. And, like, those memories are kind of the things that, that's what, like, really get you involved. And I think in the Magic community and you get them, but it's a little harder to jump in that hard. But when you get to know, you get to be like, oh, I know these people from all over the country. I know people from other countries. Like, it's an absolutely beautiful experience, and you can't get that all the times with other games.
Yeah. And that's where, like I said, just to bring it full circle, that's where it's just that, that investment we put into TCGs, wallet as part of it, but also your, the mind, how much you're thinking about it, how much you're investing your, like, every minute of your showers into, like, coming up with deck ideas and stuff,
just
like
calculating
that.
In your head, just a chin scratching, just being like, oh, how can I break this?
And it's like, it's just like having like-minded individuals, where you like, you get, you also think about combos in the shower. So like we're suddenly like on a deeper level of friendship, than you might be just with like the random person you played a game with Catan with at Gen Con or something.
So are you saying, Dan, that by being in a small TCG community that we just think more in the shower than others? I think that's what you're going apart. You know what I mean?
I think we could do a study, and I think there'd be a hypothesis there that we could make.
The type of soap we use gives us more ideas to think and break the format.
Yeah. See, now you're thinking. I like that. Well, okay. So, Gabe, let's. There's a
Final Fantasy and not soap.
This is now the Soapcast. Welcome.
SoapNet.
We're going to talk. Let's move into our main topic, because I think that was a wonderful introduction to you, and also just a great discussion about small card games in general. Because I think, and it's very apropos, I guess, for today's conversation about Final Fantasy specifically, because what we're going to be talking about is looking back on 2022 and how Final Fantasy TCG. How it performed, or how Square Enix was to it, how the community reacted, all that kinds of things. Because 2022 definitely was, like we were saying, the pandemic is more or less, finished. Square Enix definitely was we'll talk about this, but was being very cautious throughout 2022, where other card games were a little more open about it from the start of the year. But it was the first year where things really kind of opened up again. Events started happening. And the release schedule kind of got onto a normal cadence again for most games, and for most games, that's going to be part of the discussion, of course. So I guess, Gabe, what I'd like you to do, because as everyone here knows, I think Final Fantasy is a wonderful game. It's just one that I don't play actively. I do have cards and a deck and everything. Actually, check this out.
Oh wait,
video podcast. This just came in today. I had to pick this guy up from the.
Oh my God, you got it! Oh
yeah.
Oh,
it's not even focusing. My camera's not even focusing here. Come on.
Oh my
now.
God,
I got this
beautiful
25th anniversary Tifa and playmat being shown here. So I was very pumped to get that in the mail. There is going to be. Actually, if you're listening to this, there should be a giveaway up on our social media as well for a copy for yourself. So, I went ahead and picked one up to give away as well. So I'm very pumped about that. But
that's awesome. Did you get to look at it? It doesn't even look like it was. Are you keeping it just for the giveaway, or?
I have one that I literally opened this up from the box. It came in like an hour ago. So I haven't cracked open. That's going to be mine. But then the one for the giveaways, I'm keeping sealed to send to the people. So yeah, I'm pumped about that.
That artwork is just absolutely, and the mat.
It's incredible. Yep. I love it. It's awesome. But as as someone who just kind of watches from the sidelines, really, Gabe, I need your help here to guide the people, guide our audience through our journey through 2022. So why don't I just open the floor to you now, and you can start wherever you'd like. How was 2022 for the Final Fantasy TCG?
So I'll be honest with everybody. It was in an interesting kind of place, because near the beginning of the year, Square Enix took a very conservative view to it. They were, and you got to understand this. They're a Japanese-based company, also owned by Hobby Japan, which is the main producer of the game. There were a lot more. It got hit harder with the pandemic than other games. Now, and to give some people some different expectations, just there were some games like Digimon and Dragon Ball Super where they kind of opened this idea of the floodgates of let's get people playing through our official client, right? They say, okay, we're going to offer webcam games as a way for players to play this game while we're all in our homes. We're all just kind of hanging out. Now, the interesting thing about Final Fantasy, because they took a very conservative route, we didn't really hear anything about it. But I think speaking back to our talk about community, the best part about this game is not only the community people are not only very friendly, a lot of people just kind of banded together to create different kind of ways for us to play and get people involved. One of the big examples was there's a community member named White Mage. This kind of goes back to what we were talking a little bit about when it comes to the, just getting known just because you're doing something. He offered what's called the Cure series, which was it was a web-based kind of tournament league. But at the time, because we didn't have events, it was a big deal. It was like, oh, we can play, we can have this camaraderie, we can do this. We create it. And the best thing about what White Mage does is that he donated his own time and money and put free entry, put packs on the line, put stuff like that to allow players like us who, we didn't, because it was kind of, I would say it was a little radio silent from Square Enix, I'll be honest, but it's not. But that's, what I mean? Because this existed, it still allowed people, when we were talking earlier in the segment about having these different types of players who, may have not had the investment to come in and to go and play, like in some of these league games. I think a lot of the players, we kind of decided hey, the barrier to entry should not be, can I get the product? There were lots of delays in shipping for a lot of different products. There were things that were delayed, that were pushed back. A couple of different of the sets were really pushed back. So they said, hey, you can use proxies, just play. You know what I mean? And that's an amazing kind of thing. So let's kind of paint it. So, we had these Cure series kind of hosted by White Mage. We had players host different local events throughout the community. The RVA returners, they would do weekly events every week. They're doing one as we speak. So they've been kind of holding the reign, and they've even hosted bigger like online client events. It's had over 100 people through their own kind of method. We also had there was a group in what was it, the UK, that a bunch of players. It's kind of a unique situation because it wasn't really sponsored by Square Enix, but Tim Schreider, who is the head of the EU organized play, and this is where it gets a little interesting, and I think people might be interested about this, to kind of show that a lot of the people that were involved really did want this game to be moving forward. So Square Enix did not, their stance was, we do not want to support on physical play until things have settled. But Tim, like, he's been involved in various events. I can say like Rochelle, who's head of NA, and Tim, who's head of Europe. It was kind of funny. It was kind of like a little bit of a joke, because what would happen is you'd find out about this random care package that was donated. So even though it wasn't like
cheeky,
a little cheeky, like, oh, we don't support this, but oops, there's like a box of promos, there's a box of packs that just happen to be on the doorstep of this person who's organized. I don't know what happened. How did that happen? Like, so there were kind of ways that like the community really like kind of gave back. So another big tournament that happened in that middle thing, and it kind of happened for a little while. It was called I'm trying to remember it. I think it was called like the Light Series. I'm trying to remember it off the top of my head. It was like the very early games of the pandemic, where it was multiple.
Oh, I think I know the series you're talking about too, but I can't think of the name of it either.
But it was kind of interesting because you had many, and I played in a bunch of those weeks. I actually, the interesting about it was like you could play like, very similar to the Maindeck leagues. You'd play like 2 games against 2 people a week. It was scheduled, and then you have like a top 64. And then they were all these wacky formats. Like it was like we had a Highlander format. It was very unique, and that ran. And they had different. It was very interesting. They had different leagues based on the skill of the player. They had a first stage where you had people that were like well known in the community that did well. You also had people that were good, but they were maybe not as highlighted. And then you had the rest, and everybody got prizing in each of those leagues, but they tiered the leagues so that you want to work up towards the top. Because
I like that. That's really fun.
Yeah, it was kind of cool, because it was one of those kind of things that it was like, this is really a cool idea. We are getting Square Enix product, but this is not official. So Square Enix did not sponsor, but it was like a really cool experience to play a bunch of different stuff. And I'll kind of, we'll kind of paint a little bit of the picture. So a lot of that was run through these webcam leagues, these online leagues. You had different stores hosting, like the Light, based out of California by Greg Cole, that would host these events in the like hotels. They would rent out hotels to have these events. Those were our organized play, where you had some online, you had a few people organizing their own like community events. One of the things I did like, as the pandemic kind of, it still reminisces and is around. Square Enix made what's called, a winter kit. And essentially it was a way for stores to get players to kind of jump back to their store. Because after a while, you're playing online, like we need to bring people back to the store. We got to bring that revenue. And like, they offered it, and then stores could host these things, and the kits were like very affordable. Like you got a mat, you got some promos, you got this Zach Bam promo card, which the interesting part, it was actually the last big promo that was made before the shutdown happened. It got a lot of buzz because what happened was it was a fan event promo, but it kind of became this kind of legendary Stoinks card, because it was like, here's the one event that we're giving this promo, and we shut it all down.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I can see that happening. That makes
There
sense.
was announced events like different kind of crystal cups that were supposed to
Mhm.
be given out, these promos, as well as different mats, but because of the pandemic shutting it down, it was just kind of like, it became this like $500 card for no reason, because it was played in one event once. And I will
Yeah.
tell you, I'm the saddest boy in the world, because I sold that card for $40.
Oh no.
And then I saw the internet charge money for it, and I'm like, oh my god.
Oh no. We all have stories like that though.
Yeah. But I mean, the cool thing about this winter kit is you got, it was like a $30 product that you could buy from your distributor. And it came with this card, it came with a deck box, and it came with a mat. It was like, come play at your store, right? There hasn't been active events, there hasn't been anything. Come play. And it brought some people back. And what we're kind of seeing right now is we're seeing communities kind of grow back, because of that radio silence. Near the end of the pandemic, there were re-raise events that were essentially like, you're re-raising people back from playing, and they were kind of hosted throughout the US. They're outside the country as well. There was one, I was very lucky, because one of the re-raise events, I made the long drive of 20 minutes from my house.
Oof,
But
that's a tough one.
it was a heavy one, man. I had to like put shoes on that day. It was a rough one, but we got
Chug some 5-hour energies and let's go.
just let's binge, let's go. But there were other ones in Texas. There were other ones in California.
And Legendary Wolf Games hosted
Legendary
one.
Wolf Games. Well, that's right. Shout outs
Friend
to
of
them,
ours.
because they did a ton of stuff for different games through the pandemic.
Definitely.
And I think what happened was that they brought a lot of people coming back, but I think people had the distribution of how prizes were given out at these tournaments, and I'll kind of paint a little bit of a picture that this was kind of one of the, maybe, I guess, talking points for the actual events. So during the pandemic, the stores kind of were at their discretion. They were given this is how you should handle it, but again, not sponsored by Square Enix. Here's a care package. Do what you will, but this is how we think you should do it. A lot of some of the issues that came arise is that some of the stores were giving the prizes out incorrectly. There was, I'm not naming names of anything. There was a store that handed out a majority of like first place promos as raffle participation. So it created this a little bit of a kind of a miscommunication. You know what I mean? And it's fair, right? Like at the time, that's what we had, right? They were given a kit. They were trying to do what they can. But sometimes I feel like when you give there's a difference between holding your kid's hand to get to the park and saying, hey, kid, go to the park, and it's passing through a bunch of traffic. You're like, you don't want the kid to run through the traffic. They don't want to figure it out, or they're going to get, hurt. So I think one of the things that really came out of it, that we got what we wanted. We got a little bit of work. We got a little bite. There were a lot of community events that were run. And I think I mentioned that before, like RVA hosted a bunch of different stuff. The Light out of Pasadena, California hosted events. Legendary Wolf Games, they hosted a bunch of like guild events, like 1K events. But a lot of it was kind of based on the community, on the backs of that. I would even say that some of the events that I felt like were run, I will say, and I'll be blunt, I went to the re-raise event in Phoenixville, Pennsylvania. And then I went to the community-run tournament that was done in North Carolina through Game Theory up in Raleigh. Raleigh was run way more smoother. And I think one of it is because they had that direction, right? They were kind of like, this is the prizing. This is how we're structuring. These are the judges. You know what I mean? So, we did get a taste, right? We did get what we wanted. We were kind of on that island talking to a coconut, and the coconut became something, but it wasn't.
I love this analogy.
Ripe. It wasn't right. We were drinking. We were getting the first bite. It was just like a weird taste in our mouth at the end of it, and we were like,
Sure.
and then we're back at the island, and we're like, oh man, like it gave a lot of questions, I think, to a lot of people.
And I think it's important to bring up too that just to contrast, because like there's certainly people who are only see Final Fantasy stuff. Just like there's a whole bunch of people who engage in the meme of Final Fantasy has a TCG. But like actually, because
I thought this was like a Final Fantasy 14 podcast.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. But yeah, just like there's people who are on the outside like that. I'm sure there's some people who are on the inside and only really see Final Fantasy stuff. But to I think I'd say probably more people, I would guess, at least are aware of kind of what's going on and slightly in like other TCG spaces. And I think one thing that's was difficult in 2022 was seeing that Square Enix was taking and Hobby Japan was taking this very conservative approach to releasing events, whereas you had Bandai was hosting their major tournaments via webcam. Jasco was hosting major tournaments via webcam. Magic was not really doing that, but Magic was so big,
kind of thing. You know what I mean?
They were very conservative. Magic was very conservative to accept that they were so big that they were able to just say, yeah, just play F&M at home. And then they had Arena, and they said, and just play Arena.
Here's a Commander deck. Enjoy.
Yeah, they just, like, people got to go to their local store with a mask on, pick up some product, and then head home for their pre-release. And then they logged onto Arena and then played. So, like, it didn't really count. Magic isn't really part of this conversation because of that. It's a very different thing.
I don't even know what Magic is. What is Magic? What is this podcast?
Yeah, right. Yeah. It said nobody in the world.
It said no one ever.
But yeah, the thing is, like, it's got to be a little tough being like a primarily Final Fantasy player and seeing all these other companies kind of pushing out those online events, especially early in 2022, where I think like the start of 2022 was really, the general sentiment was like, I think just a lot of anxiety about what's going on here. Like, why aren't we getting the same kind of stuff that the other games are getting, and like what is happening with the game,
You ever see that episode of South Park where they're looking to see the Terrence and Phillip movie, and they go to like the TV is just breaking everywhere they go, so they run to house try to do it. That was kind of us with Final Fantasy. It's like, oh, where's the event? Oh, it broke. We got to run to the next house, and then they run a commercial, and then it's like and at the end they see the commercial. It's like 4 seconds, and you're just like, what?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
did you watch that episode, or you're just like nodding your head, like
no. I now that it took me a second. It took me a second to remember, but yeah, I do remember that one now. Yeah, it felt like I think the re-raise events, like you said, or it was important to have those happen just to get like
they needed to exist.
Yeah, the company like throwing a bone out that way, and being like, this here's, we are going to actually continue to support in this way. But it is great that the community was able to step up in the meantime and support that. And hopefully
I think it makes a mixed, and I think what you said before, it was a very mixed kind of bag kind of feel. I think, we can look at Digimon, and we could look at the online play for Dragon Ball where they were like, have at it, play webcams. We can look at, and a lot of times there were a lot of issues of people cheating in these major events.
Yes.
These major events. And to play devil's advocate here, right? Like, you could say this person who's well known in this community, but then you hear a scare of somebody cheating and it almost negatively identifies the game. You can also say with Final Fantasy, nothing happened. And a lot of times it was very quiet. So that negatively, so it's almost like, during this pandemic, and I think that's why we're seeing such a resurgence of like new games coming out and people trying new things, is because there was such an itch to do it. And there wasn't like a right way to do it, right? Yeah. Pokemon did what's called the Team Challenge during the pandemic, and that was kind of it. And they had like regionals every so often, but that was like how you played. We can look at Magic, and you could say they just kind of shot out a bunch of products that you can buy. We can talk about the proxies, the Black Lotus proxies, and get all that.
We got 2 hours 45 minutes for you to listen to that one 2 episodes ago if you're interested.
Absolutely. No, and that's the thing. So I don't think there was like, I think in a lot of ways it did stunt a lot of stuff, and I think the best thing about this game, and I think the thing that keeps me going, that actually got me motivated to do content, is that this community just keeps giving back in some way. My streaming journey really came from trying to give something back, and I think in a lot of ways, at least kind of things to look at when the new season comes. Like, I think this was something I've even had on some of my podcast stuff. Shameless plug.
Plug away. It'll be in the link down below.
Yeah.
It'll be in the description.
Thank you. No, but seriously, like, I think one of the things is we had these community events, and we, kind of being together, getting to see all these people, the camaraderie, getting to know the faces, the people who made big games out of it. One of the things we talked about, like on my podcast, have been like, do we want webcam kind of games to qualify for big national events? And we were like, no, we don't.
Yeah.
We do not. So it's kind of like, I think in a lot of ways, there's not a right answer, right? You could say, okay, well, we could have the webcam games and then we're playing all the time and people see it and that brings it. But then you get that little bit of, you hear people cheating, you hear judges that are not calling correctly. Like, you know what I mean? So I think that in a lot of ways, we kind of did the best that we could with what we had.
There's another issue that I've experienced related to webcam play, specifically with My Hero, because that's the one where I've done the most. Mm-hmm. I think like webcam play, specifically in actual events, and exactly for the reasons you're talking about, trying to deal with weird like potential cheating situations and stuff in there. The Jasco took, and again, there's no right answer to any of this stuff. It's how you do it. Jasco took a hard approach to just like making sure that they eliminate as many options for cheating as possible, to the point where, like, if you're in a webcam match in a regional level event or a provisional level event or higher with someone, and you disconnect for any amount of time in the webcam event, you lose the game. Mm-hmm. That's a game loss for you immediately. So like you're saying, like the should you allow these to be like your major qualifying events for players? Like, I completely understand both sides of the coin. It's like, it's really tough because like that is a different environment in a number of ways, and it does allow for cheating. It also allows for getting screwed out of like an event because your internet shuts down for a sec. It's like, sorry.
Especially when you have people who just kind of jump into the game, you hear about it, and you're like, wow, like I get to play, and then you experience it live, and that's your perception of competitive. And it's such a weird thing, right? Because I can look at it also, and I think a lot of times throughout the pandemic, like I was looking like, hey, like I would really like some type of official events. Now, the best part about the community is like we persevered. The community gave product away. They hosted their own events, put things like that. And honestly, it kept me alive during the game. Like, really, you know what I mean? But I think at the same time, like, would I want that to be like my way to clock into nationals, which is this year was announced in Japan? Like, I don't know. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's definitely like kind of a strange kind of like, there is no right answer. There's just the answer that's presented to you. So I think that it does paint a lot of interesting kind of, No, it does. I think there are a lot of facets to this discussion, is I think what you're trying to say with that, and it kind of shows you the breadth of them. And I would say you made a point about how the Final Fantasy players persevered. One thing I've seen, again, just like as the outsider TCG hobbyist kind of looking in, is that Final Fantasy's community is honestly one of the most just like
tenacious and dedicated group of players who, like, you know, when I talk to the Final Fantasy players, it's like, I mean, everybody loves their games that they play, but it feels to me like the ones who are like, if you're a Final Fantasy player, it's like you are ride or die. Like Final Fantasy is like the game for you. And I get, you know, I get that appeal of it too. And you know, it's like, from the IP to the easy to pick up mechanics, you know, like I remember when the game came out, I was like, yeah, it's kind of like Magic. It's like I feel like it's done a good job of really like differentiating itself and like how it goes about how like pulling you in directions and yeah, it's the resource system, of course, being like the key thing. But Final Fantasy is this really, in my opinion, really nice blend of that sort of like that kind of straightforward Magic like Western like gameplay with just that sprinkling of those Japanese TCG elements, especially like the EX burst system and everything.
It's like the split second. For anybody who doesn't know, EX burst is like a semi-split second. It's kind of its RNG kind of feel to it, because how you get dealt damage is you flip a card off the top of the deck and take a point. But you get the ability of the card if it's a burst, an EX burst.
And so a lot of those Japanese TCGs have a catch-up mechanism built into them. You know, if you look at like games like Weiss Schwartz and Cardfight and stuff, they have that kind of thing. And so this is like, it was just like that perfect little, you know, that little touch added to the top where it's like okay, like
salt guy with the little salt.
Yes, it's a little salt bay, little salt bay on there. Exactly. And I get why people get so like dedicated to it mechanically, and I also get, of course, like as someone who's grown up with playing Final Fantasy games and everything, you know, the draw of the IP is absolutely huge. But it's like, it's almost like it goes beyond that. It's like these people who get into the game then are like, I mean, the community has, just like you said, has this shown in 2022 their ability to band together and to support each other and support the game. And if anything, I think 2022 has really been the year of just the community kind of rising and saying, this game is not going to go away from us.
Dying.
We're not going to let it happen. And that's, I think, really something to be applauded on the part of the community, for sure. But like you said, it's also hard to it's hard to take Square Enix to task for some of that, because it's like, you know, I get the reasons why they, you know, for health and safety reasons. And also, like you're saying, like, do we really want to make these webcam events for a multitude of reasons be like the primary, the sort of the pinnacle of gaming for a while? What will it do to the game in the long term?
We also, and I think this is also a very another kind of important thing to kind of look at, and I might ask you a couple questions just based on that. So, you know, we look at Magic the Gathering based out of the U.S., Western kind of feel to it, right? So they had a more of a gauge and be like, okay, they could go into the office and have these discussions. Did they do that? Did they host these events? Not really. But like, you know, you also look at Japan, the rates of death within was very, very high. So you also got to think to yourself, like, and there were slower, you know, I mean, every card game felt when the Japanese printers were shut down and there were delays for many, many games. A lot of people were like wanting their cardboard while they're hanging out in their home. They're like, I can't get, like, you know, we'll get it to you, you know, next month. And
got stimulus check money burning a hole in your pocket too.
Burning a hole in your wallet, just like crazy. But like, I think that's the thing. I think you also got to look at it on kind of both perspectives, right? Like, they might have not been able to really safely, you know, kind of jump in and say, hey, like, how do we even construct this? Sure, we can have like these communications through, like, you know, like through, you know, like Microsoft Teams. That's like the way of the world now. You just go through Microsoft Teams to do your job. But like, when you say, hey, how do we let these people play when we can't even meet to play or figure things out? So I think you're right. I think in a lot of times when you're looking at different card games, and this is one of the questions, like, I don't know if you're as familiar with any of the Cardfight Vanguard. I know that's Bushiroad, which was based in Japan. Do you know how they approached the kind of way? Do you have any idea?
I will actually say, unfortunately, so Bushy's the one company that I keep the least tabs on, because it's specifically because in our area, of the US, it just they could never hold, and so like we've never really had a community for them. I recognize that in other places the Bushy games are a lot more popular. We have a very small community of Weiss Schwarz players. Our card fight Vanguard players died, not literally. Sorry, our community died off, sort of, but not like the people. Actually,
yeah. No, I get what you're saying.
But yeah, like
it's not all dead. Please stop throwing. It's not like that. It's just like it's a small little community, and I think that's something interesting because in Pennsylvania there isn't really a distinguished Weiss Schwarz community, but the card fight Vanguard community was huge.
Yeah,
you could play and I think that's another thing to gauge, right? Like, and just to paint other pictures. And this is actually another portion of where you could look at organized play. We saw that the Japanese kind of players made like these at home like Discord events that I believe, and I'm not 100% sure about the structure of how the company compares to the Japanese, but they were able to like sponsor like small events, but they were very concentrated, like less than 10 people, like. But the Square Enix did push those kinds of things. But like, I guess what I'm trying to make the contrary, like, when you have all these different, distributors of different areas, where, you have your 3 distributors in the US, in Japan, I believe it's done. Man, I'm brain farting here. What's the big one in the UK? Like the Card Market. So Card Market is like one of the bigger, you have all these different distribution chains. With some of these other card games that are just like, they're based out of different regions of the country. It's very hard. We talk about Flesh and Blood, and we say that that area was able to do online. They were like, we're gonna we're gonna knock it down. Hard. We're gonna shut it down. Yep. We're shutting it down, and then they kept playing, and that's, I think, one of the reasons why Flesh and Blood got so big, because they were in a contained area that kind of figured it out. You know what I mean? Like, kind of were like. So I think that plays to that. And I kind of, to bring everything, kind of sum it up a little bit, you got to give a little bit of kind of lax, because they may have not have been able to make the decision to say, hey, we're going to have playback, because they couldn't even meet up to do that. Like, what's their gauge in their country compared to, other areas where, like Magic, which is based out of the US, we saw that change.
I think the trouble some people will have with that is just that they've gotten to watch Bandai, another Japanese company, just basically make the other decision. Like you said, I don't think there was a right answer, but there's an answer that impacts you one way and an answer that impacts you another way.
You have to feel something, whether it's good or bad, no matter how they dealt with it.
Right. And so Bandai chose instead to push online events, and as you said, Bandai had a rash of potential cheating scenarios that occurred during these events. And it's just like, the company just kind of weighing the possible long-term, consequences of any of these decisions and trying to figure it out. I think that I'm gonna take a stance, because I think people like when you take a stance. Do that. I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do it. My stance is that I don't fault Square Enix Hobby Japan at all for making the decisions they did for the reasons they did. But I will always take a company to task a little bit for not saying, well, what else can we do then?
I think that's a fair point. And I think that's I think a point that probably would be the bigger kind of the learning point of how the game kind of structured, right? We, as a community for a very long time, I feel like we've been very self-resourceful. We've figured out ways to do it. We've done it. We're doing it. We're still doing it. And now, and I think one of the things I'd love to, at least say, like near the end, we got the announcement of organized play back for 2023. We still don't know how that's going to look like. We did get a taste. We did get something. They did support the stores. They did get something, even with, and I think, I think that in a lot of ways I think we did get a really weird taste in our mouth, but I think at the same time, it does show when a game actually says, here's a resource to do it as. Now, I think one of the things that really kind of helped to push at least keep it together is the community banding together so well that even though they didn't say anything, we said it. We didn't need it. We said it ourselves. We didn't need to have them do it. And now that they are saying something, even in some of my podcasts, we're saying, hey, now you're talking. This is what we don't want, right? We don't want webcam games to qualify for big national. I mean, for some of the card games that came out, that you would get these $5,000 cards for webcam games where you find out somebody's cheating like 2 weeks later. It's like, you're right. I agree. I definitely think that it spoke some volume. But I think, at the end of the day, if we keep looking back at the negatives, it doesn't push what the goal of the community to do it. When we talk back about in the beginning of the podcast that saying making your voice heard in the community cannot even just be a really good player. It can be somebody who really was just willing to push it, a personality, something that said something. I think those that's what spoke. Now we spoke and they listened, and now they're listening and they're pushing towards something better for next year. Like with the new set of Resurgence of Power, we have these autograph. There's the chase card.
Yes, I've seen that thing. Ooh, gorgeous.
I actually did a stream with another friend of ours from the local community. Shout outs to Zap for when he does a lot of variety. He opened 2 boxes on my stream. We were chasing there is a Yuffie card, a full art Yuffie card, but the cool part, it takes a lot of the essence of like old TCG. I know why Swartz does it with the gold autographed voice actor cards, but they have an gold autographed Yuffie card from the new set, which is really, I think, very much like Pokemon, and like, we can talk MetaZoo in the sense of like, there's these glorified cards that people are chasing. That brings the eyes. That's something that any game that has a card that not only brings attraction to it, but brings some market value to it, that's going to bring some eyes and ears over.
I'm glad you brought this up because, I think that's I think we could probably just go around circles about the tournaments for a long time, but I do want to talk about the set releases for the year as well, because that's obviously an important part. I am really glad that you brought up that specific Yuffie card, because in particular, we were talking about this in some of our other podcasts for some of the other games, but one thing that I think is very true about TCGs in just the modern era right now is that more than ever, it's important to have cards in your game that people get excited about finding, and specifically because that is what people want to show off on social media. Social media is such an important part of marketing TCGs these days, and getting a card that you are excited to post to Instagram, that you're excited to, like if you want to make a YouTube video of it, you want to post it to people in Discord or whatever, on Facebook, on Twitter, you want to tweet about the thing you pulled, like all of that stuff it's almost, I mean, I know there's a cost associated to like setting up the specific manufacturing infrastructure to make these things, but making a cool looking card is as close as free advertising as you get these days for a TCG, that like it's crazy to me that more TCGs still are it's taken this long, I guess, for some of them to jump on. If you're a new TCG coming out, this should be built in to your game right now, right from the start. And so that Yuffie was such a great jump for the game to start to be able to introduce those things. Like when they added the full arts back in set Opus 9, I think it was, around there.
Yeah.
They, that was obviously awesome, because one of the things people have always complained about for Final Fantasy is like, but the art is just like a, so there's some
JPEG
charm
picture.
Right. There's some charm to it, but like
snippet.
Yeah, sometimes it's like this just looks like whatever. Like, but yeah, the full arts look gorgeous, and then getting that signature and stuff on top is beautiful.
Yeah, you can't, and I think that kind of goes with a regular marketing kind of perspective. I go to, I'm still finishing up my degree for marketing, and I think, we as a society, we look at memes all the time. We look at things, any picture, you have like 5 seconds to get somebody's attention, and if you're looking on somebody's screen and you see this beautiful beautiful card, you see a gold signature, it's something that resonates with you. You're in, you want to look more. And that's, a lot of card games I think are really getting to notice the whole, I think like games, that have done the signatures that are getting those eyes. I think like just being able to see that like is a great not only thing for collectors, but new eyes. Like that's what how these new games like kind of prosper. You get something attractive, and I think Final Fantasy did a decent job with that throughout the year. They used a lot of they resonated a lot with some of the IPs that were open, and they made a lot of themed kind of products. One of the more recent ones that came out was the Final Fantasy 15 Retainers 2-deck starter. That came out just a little bit ago. It made a very big impact in the meta, but like 15 was the newest one. I know that they also just, it was after a big announcement of Final Fantasy 16 coming out. So it brought a lot of eyes. People were looking already. They were already excited about this new game and excited about this new thing. And I think that, other products that really came out through this year, like Resurgence just came out like 2 weeks ago. So for anybody that wants to get in on some cards before some big events that come up, this is the time to do it, because this game is really, really, it's a really affordable game, and get in before there's any events. You might pick up a card that's like a couple bucks that might be worth a lot, which is really kind of changed the elements. I think to talk about products, Emissaries of Light came out during the pandemic around April. We had the anniversary collection, which was, in my opinion, very huge for the growth of the game. So for anybody who doesn't know, one of the biggest things, some barrier to entry to Final Fantasy, and I feel like you could probably say the same thing when it comes to like Legacy in Magic or Modern in Magic. Mm-hmm. Final Fantasy is eternal, so there's sets 1 through like 18. They made a product that basically had like 3 of every decent staple in a Squall like deck box, which was kind of glorified, and it had like all these cards that were literally like, Amaterasu was a very popular card throughout the metagame, throughout the tournament series. It's essentially, for anybody who doesn't know, think of it as like the Final Fantasy's version of Force of Will. Yeah. And like that card literally was a heroic, which for anybody who doesn't know, you get 1 heroic in every pack. It was $25 a piece. Like absolutely nuts. Like some card that like you just played, like you can win the game sometimes if you just play it in the right way. But they gave you a play set. They said, hey, that was another big appeal that I did like about what they did, because during re-raise, they made these beautiful gold Amaterasu as cards as participation promos. Yeah. Which is, I think, another thing that they did very well. They said, here's a card, here's something that people want that they can use. I'm just going to give it to you,
Yep. So out of the 3 sets that releases here, Emissaries of Light, Rebellion's Call, Resurgence of Power, do you think, well, no, I'm not even do you think. I'm going to make you pick. Nope, you have to. What's the best release and what's the worst?
Best and worst. Okay.
That's all you got to do.
All right. No. All right. I'll kind of list it in this manner, and I'll kind of explain why.
Please.
In my opinion, I think that the Rebellion's Call was probably the best. I think there was a lot of new mechanics that they kind of released into. One of the ones that they kind of revisited were like the crystal mechanic. For anybody who's not familiar with the crystal mechanic, essentially think of that as energy in Magic. It was like kind of like a free that they kind of built upon. I think my least favorite was definitely Emissaries of Light. Now I'm going to kind of explain. Now during the organized play meta, one of the biggest decks through 15 was I think everybody loved this, that like Avalanche was like one of the big Avalanche operators, which is basically all your favorite Final Fantasy VII characters. Actually, let me change. I think 16. Yeah, that's Rebellion's Call. That's right. That was my least favorite because it made one of the Sori member decks. The deck was very, to give anybody an example, it was a very you could basically go off and deal a bunch of damage on like turn 2 or 3. And one of its biggest resource systems, which is kind of one of the big things, is the EX burst. You could go and kind of do this aggressive aggro kind of play, but like when your opponent hit you, it would kill your opponent, which would be a huge tempo swing. I would definitely think 16 was my least favorite. Now the newest set that just came out, Opus 17, which I think
you're 2 behind. It's 19, right? Is it Resurgence of Power? I think that's 19.
Resurgence of Power, is that? Now I gotta look. Oh my god, I gotta look that up now.
I think so.
I think so. I see. That's what kills me. So another thing is that I kind of wish. So for anybody who doesn't know, we originally, when the cards came out, we had Opus 1, Opus 2, Opus 3. They recently.
Oh no, I think you're right. I don't know. I don't
know.
I don't know what I'm thinking here. Everyone, 13, 14, 15, 16 was Emissary, 17 was Rebellion's Call, 18 Resurgence of Power.
Yeah. Okay. So definitely. I definitely think that 16 was my least favorite. 17, in my opinion, was probably one of my favorites because it brought back a couple archetypes that really didn't get to see a lot of play for a very long time. One of them was Earth Lightning X-Death. For anybody who doesn't know, there's a remove from play pile, and it kind of put this element of this X-Death card. It was a 6-cost 8K. When it came into play, it would remove all cards from both people's break zone, and it allowed it allowed him to get stronger for each card in the break zone, which was kind of a new kind of mechanic. Like we had cards that were removed from play, but it didn't matter for anything other than that. Then we were seeing creatures that kind of check that kind of piece. I'm really, really excited about the new set that just came out, Resurgence of Power. It brought a lot of new mechanics, one of them being the warp mechanic.
Yes.
Warp mechanic is essentially suspend. Yes, exactly. But
from Magic.
The interesting thing, and this is kind of something in just being a judge, just understanding. So in the game, for anybody who doesn't know, in Final Fantasy, I mentioned that Amaterasu was like a force of will. This is where it's different. Amaterasu stops an auto ability, an enter the field ability. The interesting part about warp is when you suspend a creature, you kind of suspend it for a couple turns. There is a response trigger of allowing the creature to come from the remove from the play pile into play. Now, let's say if I had a character that did not have an effect when it entered the field, you could not respond to it unless I switched phases. There's actually, with the warp mechanic, there's actually now a phase where you can respond to it coming into play. There are cards that say, like, a card removed from the field cannot come into play this turn. So it created another layer of the stack.
Okay.
Which is kind of I think it's very, very unique. It allows for cards that like had really powerful abilities. You could play them in a faster tune. You could have them play a bunch of different kind of options, but it also balances itself, right? We didn't have a way to respond to forwards that may have not had entered the field abilities until this warp mechanic.
Sure, so that's interesting.
It's kind of cool because it allows the balance aspect is really kind of interesting because we didn't have that layer, and since there is that layer, we have that layer of control. But it also, this new set has a lot of interesting things coming out. Like it made Rampier, which was an old archetype in Opus 11, kind of live with Theodore. Wind Earth is starting to get some new. We're seeing a lot of, what you'll see is, for anybody who's not familiar with Final Fantasy, it has very much kind of feels to like modern Magic now. I feel like you're just playing modern Magic, but like with a way cheaper cost. They'll print a card that just makes this deck that didn't see play like very good. And it just makes the price to entry very good. So I think, to answer the question in full, I'm probably the most excited about this new set that comes out because it's very unexplored right now. My least is probably the Opus 16, where Sori members kind of came into play because it was kind of a very linear metagame.
Okay, that's reasonable. I want to bring another thing up too. I feel like we can't possibly end this podcast without talking about this. We've danced around it a little bit, right?
Sure.
But
lay it on me, Jeff.
yeah, okay. So, one thing that happened in 2021 into 2022. I mean, it started to really ramp up during the pandemic and everything. But now it's very easy to sit down and say that one of the top most popular, most played video games in the world is Final Fantasy 14, the MMORPG. It actually is. It's pretty. I really think I think it's very laudable. Actually, the game went from its start, which by the way, if you don't know much about this, like Final Fantasy 14 started and just like was full of terrible systems and tanked really hard, and the company went back. They pulled the whole thing off. They're like, we're gonna try this again. We're not gonna let this just die this way. And then they made Final Fantasy 14 A Realm Reborn, and then they brought it out, and then it was very successful. And then like every MMORPG, it's like starts out, it's very successful, and then it just dwindles, and that's some good expansions and everything. I'm not actually a 14 player, but I'm an MMORPG fan, so I like a follow. Just I'm interested again, like I would do with the TCG.
You have a little bit of class in you,
No. Actually, if I weren't playing my main MMO, then I would probably be playing Final Fantasy 14 instead. So, it just like every other MMO, or just kind of like, has dips, expansion, pops up a little, then dips, expansion, pops up a little, dips, but it's like always kind of on this like downtrend a little bit. Final Fantasy 14 has just been surging like no other MMO can. Like a lot of other non-World of Warcraft MMOs have been doing well, but Final Fantasy 14 kind of got the lion's share of that, right?
They did. Yeah, I think. Go ahead. Sorry.
Well, I was just gonna cap that with my question, which is like the thing that people are asking is like, why isn't Square Enix capitalizing on this for their other merchandise, including the TCG? And it's just it's an open-ended question. I don't think there's an answer we can come to, but it's the question that people are going to ask. Is the other thing that you look at 2022 and you see like, wow, Final Fantasy is doing well as an IP. And it feels like the TCG should be seeing a higher amount of gain than it does see from that happening. Don't you think that?
I do. You know what? It's kind of, and this is how bad I'm into this game. Like you said, the loyalness. So I actually did, I'm still going to school for marketing and I'm still working on that. I actually did an entire project on Hobby Japan. Now, for anybody who doesn't know, Square Enix has the licensing contract, but Hobby Japan is actually the company that produces the game. But if you look at the Hobby Japan kind of layering of their business, it's very weird. So they make the collectible games. They also make like D&D miniatures. They make things like that. They're also in charge of military use. They make tanks for the Japanese army.
Okay. I didn't know that.
It's very, very strange, and they offer other different portions of like different like weaponry and stuff. So something tells me that there's some weird like I feel like I'm answering the question with another question, but like I think there's so many weird layerings of how that company works that like I'm not sure like. I think there's a little bit of a disconnect. I agree. I think that there should be more 14 product. Now, I will say at some of the festival events that they did pre-pandemic, they were offering card game demos. But I do agree. I definitely think that they should be pushing more of this. 14 is one of the biggest MMOs out there, especially with the WoW scandal. And the Blizzard, like they should be capitalizing on that more. Now, I don't know how directly connected they are, because I think with Hobby Japan being the actual distributor of the game, where I think Square Enix kind of acts as a licensing property, I don't know how much of a connect. Like another kind of interesting thing to learn. A lot of the times when they commission artwork, we were talking about artwork, how some of the artwork just looks like, like mspaint.com, and some of them is like this gorgeous Armano painting, you know what I mean? Like these gorgeous, one of the big things about this new set, they have Armano art cards of like Sephiroth and Cloud, like these specialty cards.
Yes,
but they have
seen
to
those.
commission Armano. You know
Yep.
what I mean? I think, and for anybody who's even aware in the TCG world, Armano just did art for Magic. And that's like another, I think that's where the difference is. Like they have to commission that art. Like it's not a direct to consumer where like I feel like if Square Enix was, they have the IP, they can say, let's put said product, 14 product, and then put cards in it. And that just kind of coexists. But I think that little bit of, you know what I mean, where Hobby Japan is a different thing. I think that's where that disconnect is. And this is me completely talking out of the air, but I think that could be something.
There definitely is some sort of disconnect there. What you see, I think, is it feels like what they push a lot with the game is a lot of just I don't know. It's sort of the bog standard, like what you'd expect. It's like, okay, so we see a lot of Final Fantasy VII stuff. That's great. Like obviously, everyone loves Final Fantasy VII, but it's like, it doesn't feel very, it doesn't feel like it's timely advertisement. It's just kind of like that's okay. We should make a new promo. What should it be? Probably Final Fantasy VII, I guess, or like maybe let's do a Final Fantasy 15 deck. That was the new one. It's like it's kind of like it's just it almost feels like it's someone who just got a job in marketing there, and they're like, okay, you tell us what our next product is. They're like, I don't know, like probably 15, I guess. You just made that one, right?
I do find that kind of funny that you mentioned that, because one of the things about the promos, there's always been kind of issues with the promos when it comes from the warehouse to the actual, the local game store. But a lot of times, a lot of the promos that were released, there were kind of a mixed bag of, sometimes they were very relevant OP cards, like that you could use and they would encourage people to play. And then you get these like random ones that like, I've not seen this card ever. What is it doing here?
Yeah.
Like it definitely feels like there's a little bit of a disconnect, and like I really do like and for anybody listening in, like I'm looking at some of the company like products that Hobby Japan use, like they distribute like their own kind of anime publications. They're doing they do a lot of models, like a lot of Gunpla models.
Mm-hmm.
They do Dungeons and Dragons, like what I mean. I think I really wish that sometimes that like we would get kind of like correlating like 14. It's the biggest game in the world. Why aren't we getting more promos in that 14 manner? Like you just bought a mat with a Tifa to replicate Final Fantasy VII. You even said it. You're like, it's not my game, the game I play, but I bought this because this was awesome.
Yep.
You not even being, that's what gets people in, not the correlating. Now, I will say in the last couple of sets, they did put a lot of 14 cards that were really relevant in there, which I think helps, right?
Yes. Yeah. And I think that's awesome that they do that, because it's clearly something where like I probably will never understand the story, because I'm probably not going to have the time to sit down and play through that when I have too many other games that are just like I'm currently preferring.
You're on the stack. Like, that's what happens. Yeah. I literally have that same stack.
So I'll never quite know who Ishtola is or whatever, but like that's okay, like I have no problem with that, and I think it's actually great that they can put that in for the people who are invested in the game. But for me it's the two sides of it. The one side is like, where are the the starter decks focused on, hey, the newest story that came out in 14, now you can play it here, like that should be a thing.
This now, this thing that you are playing right now, here is the card. You could play this game too, and
then where are the like the tie-ins the other way, the like, hey, this new expansion's coming out, and you see the advertisement online of saying, and check out this card for, by the way, there's a card gift to play into the meme of like, there's a Final Fantasy card game, like. Yeah. But like the reason that's a meme is because these opportunities just feel like missed opportunities all the time. And what it reminds me of actually quite a bit is like, we've had this issue with Panini's card games in the past too. So like with Dragon Ball Z and everything, is that like the games division of Panini was often, in our experience, and this is just like, again, from like kind of that outsider perspective, like you say, just like what we can guess is like, it's just this larger company focused on so many other honestly bigger fish to fry. Like not even games for in Panini's case, but in some other companies' cases, games that it's like I guess they're just having trouble, ever being able to prioritize doing anything like that. Cause it's like, well, they got all these other irons in the fire. They're trying to get the latest Gunpla out. They're trying to keep up with Wizards D&D releases or something. It's like, I guess it just feels like maybe the numbers aren't big enough for them to really prioritize that. But that's, of course, I'll answer, I'll do the comment. Oh, that's speculation, but I'll fill in the comment for the people before they go and type it. That is a self-fulfilling prophecy, of course, right? It's like if you don't actually do the marketing, it's going to continue to be too small to do the marketing, and then it's it's just like it's a loop.
I get it, and I know very, very early in the game, in the podcast, we were talking a little bit about some of these games that really like kind of kept themselves alive like through the budgeting. I think budgeting is the name of the game, right? Mm-hmm. If I have just looking at Hobby Japan, like I could make these applications that are like these animes where people are at home in the pandemic that they can actually read and do things with. I feel like I'm going to put more budgeting towards that than like this card game that's very niche, very small, very subdivision of our business, and put that there. Now, like you said, if you don't push more money, then it just kind of stays in that small level. So essentially, we see that there's this kind of like, how do you grow if you just stay in this kind of budgeted realm? But I think when you're dealing with, you're like a subsection of a subsection of a subsection, it makes it very hard for you to make the choice, right? I may, and we can even talk about this in real life politics, we want to create a brand new division. Let's say company A wants to make a brand new division, which starts this brand new startup company, like kind of development, but it costs a lot of money. It's near the end of the year, and these other portions of the company are making more money. They have a larger budget. We don't, so we have to ask these higher markets, and they can keep asking and asking and asking, and then by the time you just get either like no, or like maybe when there's a bigger budget. So I think you're right. I think the best way to pinhole that kind of idea is by adding to the budget. But I think when you see all these businesses that had strangleholds because of the pandemic, there were a lot of games that died. We could talk about Argent Saga that died during the pandemic because they just were struggling and just like melted. I think there are games that like tried to blow it through the moon and they crashed. Where games like this, where it's budgeted, it's small, it's very community driven, they do put money towards it, but it's a very small subject. That's how we've lived. It's kind of a weird thing to say too, but the collector's market in Final Fantasy, I really does help to sustain the game. So having these like these 2-player starter decks, they really keep it together. But I think the way they're budgeting has actually helped to keep them sustain themselves.
Yeah.
You see where I'm going with that?
Yeah. If you don't risk too much, then you don't have that much to lose, right? And then it's I mean, like that's kind of the idea there. And I think also there's just talking about again so much about this is just about the pandemic's impact on Final Fantasy, but it's hard to escape that really, given just the stance they took on everything. But like, if you are, I guess let me put it this way. In 2023, I'm going to be very interested to see if anything changes regarding this, because it obviously is a good idea to market your massively multiplayer online RPG during the pandemic. We saw that every MMORPG, every like the video game market in general, like look at Animal Crossing, look at like it did so well during the pandemic, as everybody had the money to, people were like, oh, I can finally buy a Switch.
I have my
I can
check. What can I buy?
Yep, I can finally subscribe for a year to Final Fantasy. Try it out, so it makes sense at that point to go like, wow, like, like this is like where if we put money in, it's going to come back. But it doesn't make sense to set that up with a trading card game, especially when the company is attempting to get you to not play it in person with other people because they don't want anyone to risk anything doing it. And we're still, like you said, they're just announcing that the tournament series are on for next year, where we don't even know the details yet. It's like if there's going to be a tie-in with 14, like an actual marketing campaign, I don't think we would have even seen it yet, because like that stuff takes time to set up and to build, and they were marketing into an unknown, but like pandemic filled world.
Mars.
Yeah. So it's like maybe I'm going to hold out hope, right? That there's a chance that if they want to really capitalize on how well Final Fantasy 14 is doing, that's something that's coming, next year. And I don't know that it is, but if it is, it does make sense to me that it hasn't happened quite yet, given the pandemic.
Yeah, no, I definitely do agree. And I think a lot of that comes from how this new market is coming. I mean, one thing I was going to mention earlier, one of the things they actually tried as of the last couple of weeks is they've streamed some box openings of Final Fantasy, of these new cards on the official Square Enix Twitch channel. Great. The other thing I've noticed is that the Twitch, they've been kind of advertising their other games. So to say, hey, this is like a free platform kind of like streaming service, and we pair them together in a weird way, it is kind of doing that, because if that's why any streamer has like a consistent schedule to say, oh, well, if I see this, I might as well tune in and see what happens. And if that exists, you just, because you're Square Enix, people are going to look because of the big pop in 14. You're going to see all these other things. So I think they are trying to implement it. It's in small waves. I can't say that they're like you said, like they're not like putting a plug during these big pushes in 14, but they're starting. It's been, I think for Final Fantasy, it's been very much a like they took a very, very conservative route to how the game was going to increasingly progress. And I think that they're starting to say, hey, we can use this as ways to market our campaign. We can use this. So I think, I know you mentioned that, having like a slayaway sentence, to sum up, they kind of had a very like subtle but thriving kind of feel to it. They've made pinches. They've put little Salt Bay wounds in, and they've made interest. And I think they're starting to learn that like, maybe there are ways we can do it through these subdivisions that aren't super expensive, right? I can put a camera on when I'm opening packs of cards, and then I can also advertise 14 or advertise 16 that's coming out that was announced. I think them pinholding different things and saying, oh, these things exist with these things are going to get more eyes to the game. I think that, the game, what I've noticed even in my local community is that it is growing, slowly growing, but it comes with the view and the idea that they can mix those types of marketing together. Now, I do think that those layers, those subdivisions of a subdivision of the subdivision makes it hard for a company like that to actually put that many marketing dollars. But there's many different, like you said, social media marketing is such a huge plethora of how you get exposed to things. And you don't have to put a ton of money to it. You know what I mean? It can be budgeted.
Yep. I totally agree. And I would say the other element of the year that I just want to reiterate for Final Fantasy is just that I feel like 2022 really was that year of sort of a community determination. The community just banding together, like you said, and really just trying to be resilient and holding on to hope that, like you're saying, that Square Enix and Hobby Japan are kind of learning. Specifically Hobby Japan, obviously learning like what they can do to market the game, but also hopefully working with Square Enix to continue to put out these new ideas. And I think the community has no intention of going anywhere. And I think from what we're seeing in the releases too, I really appreciate, obviously just to be clear, it's obvious that the people making the game, the producer and everything, I mean, they are passionate about the game that they're producing.
For anybody that doesn't know, for a lot of the major events, the creator of the game is Teru Kageyama. He comes to all the events. He takes pictures. He signs cards. Like it's they're very adamant about making it work. It's never just like you're not hearing from a signal in the sky. It's not like Force of Will where the building, there's this card and it's toxic, and then you just I Spy just doesn't say anything for months, and then you're like, they just make a random errata, and you're like, what? What? Like, where is this coming from?
Yeah, it's clear that Kageyama-san is like just absolutely adores this baby that he works with, and it's nothing about that. It's I agree that it reminds me of my experience with like Panini Dragon Ball Z and stuff. It feels like the company itself doesn't quite know how to deal with it, given the budget, given the plan. But I do think that, like you said, there are some signs that they're starting to improve some of those things. I think even like the signed Yuffie card in Resurgence of Power is an example of them kind of like figuring out ways where they can start to slip into the budget some more of these things that will start to help, and those live streams and everything. So I feel like 2023, I'm cautiously optimistic for Final Fantasy. I think it's not
than what I said.
Not heavily cautiously, because I do see all the right signs, for the game. But just a little bit, because it's like, I don't want to expect too much. Is that too bad of a statement to say?
You know what? I think here's how I look at this, right? And I think throughout the game, I've been playing since Opus 2, which has been like a 10-year kind of a stint in regards to it. So I've seen kind of the different moves that they've made. They've always kind of made very baby steps. And it's not been, I would never say, I mean, this was essentially their first TCG. Like, I wouldn't consider they helped to produce minis for D&D. It's not really anything like that. So they had some growing pains, and they've had that, and it's been getting a little bit better with every bit. And I think we've seen it as time goes on that it gets a little bit better. But the game keeps surviving. The collector's market really does speak volumes to how this game has lived in its essence. And now I think the company is realizing like there's a player base that can get in, but there's these collectors that can get this signed Yuffie card, and then they just kind of look, and there's a Final Fantasy card game. Oh, because I get this voice actor signed card. The next set just, that was announced, there's going to be a Cloud Gold signed card. So they're making exactly. I don't think anybody wants that card whatsoever who has any essence of any Final Fantasy, right? Like, I don't want it at all. Just don't even
right.
It's like, who? But that's like you said, when you were just showing off your mat, like you weren't even involved. You saw the artwork, you saw the mat, and it got you. You didn't even have to be a Final Fantasy card game player to want that product.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that's such an important thing. We're seeing steps. We're seeing the movement of them trying to push it towards other markets. I will say that people, we've been having a bigger events online now. I mean, locals are starting to pop up again. There's interest. There's people growing. The people in the community are very self-sustaining. But I think these small little substantial kind of marketing techniques, they're starting to work. And I think with how low budget it's been able to survive, but they're learning slowly, but learning.
I totally agree. And I'm excited just to see, I'm always excited, like I said, just to watch from the sidelines, just to watch Final Fantasy continue. I hope the community continues to get what they're looking for, and I really would like at some point for this whole "did you know Final Fantasy has a TCG" thing to no longer be a meme. I think that would be excellent. But
no, it'll never die. It'll always be a meme. Said it here first.
Yeah, but to bring it full circle again, there's also, again, I think as long as the game is making enough money to keep being produced, and it's not like the IP's going anywhere. Like that's one thing. Like you can say about so many other, maybe not One Piece, but like so many other No, they actually announced One Piece is finally coming to an end, didn't they? But there's like 100 years of content for that. But for many other IPs, it's like, I don't know when they're going to just decide to finally be done with Dragon Ball Super or something. Like they went on a really long hiatus, and like there's like from the anime, the manga's been publishing, but like at some point that's going to end, right? But it's like, when's Final Fantasy the IP going to be done? I mean, I think after we're dead.
Yeah, after we're dead, that is for sure.
It's like it's it's not like that's ever going to be a problem for like having content to produce or anything. So it just, as long as the game's making enough money and the Hobby Japan wants to continue to put forth that, like you said, that budget of resources towards it, it's going to be a game that people will get to continue to enjoy playing, I think.
And I think one thing that really does pull in, and if anything to take from this episode of the podcast, is that the community will build itself. I'll make a huge example. One of the Gen Cons that I worked, before one of the Crystal Cups, I was in the Learn to Play demo section, teaching people. I teach people how to play. I'm so bad at the game now because I just teach everybody else to be better than me. It's ridiculous. One of the guys that I taught, he was based out of Florida. His name's Dave Malenza. He's my boy. I love that kid. He's been to my house several times. He crashed at my house for one of the re-raises. I introduced him to his entire group of locals in the Miami community, and now he's a content creator. He makes content for Pokemon, he makes content for that, and people are starting to get that same leverage. We will show you how to play, and it will grow itself. I think one of the things that I love about this game is that the community is always giving back. We're always helping out kids at our locals, and for anybody who wants to start a local game at their local game store, just buy a bunch of cards like a degenerate and give them out to people. Like, people will start to play. I think because of the love that this community just gives to everybody, no matter how big or small, the game will stay alive and it will grow. I think these small progressions that Square Enix have done are getting those eyes to come. We can do it ourselves. The marketing team is starting to get better. They're learning. But you know what I mean? At the end of the day, I think as long as they keep that budgeting small, they let the community itself grow itself, and they start to improve, we're going to see increases. It's only a matter of time. And I think with the announcement of organized play, it's only going to go up from here.
Yep, and I definitely agree, and I sure hope to see that. I'm excited to watch how it does in 2023 and beyond. So, do you have any last shots for us about 2022 there?
I mean, honestly, I think that there's been a lot of progression in the overall game state. There's been a lot of just a lot of improvement in the game. If you're ever curious on how to play, I stream it every so often for Maindeck. Whenever they have a league tournament, I'll definitely happily go in. If you ever want to have me again, I know this was a longer one, but I'd be happy to talk more about it. And I mean, I think overall organized play, it had a little dip, but we're starting to get back to that. I think one of the big things is the community really grew it. We had a re-raise event near 20 minutes away, had I would say around 6. They capped it. It sold out because they only capped it at a small number, which, is a whole nother, this could be another 2 hours if we talk about this.
Yes, absolutely.
But, there was a community run event in North Carolina by the RVA returners, and shout outs to them. They're doing amazing things. They hit almost double. You know what I mean? Almost double. So we're just growing. We're still always growing, and we're going to get there. So OP will only grow as we do.
Awesome. Well, yeah, Gabe, it has been great to get to chat with you again. I do swear we're gonna meet in person at some point.
Maybe someday.
It's gonna happen, but yeah, we'll probably have you on a podcast, at least another one. Maybe before then, maybe after. We'll just have to see, but we'll have you back on again sometime for sure. I really do appreciate you coming on today and sharing your wisdom about all things Final Fantasy, as well as a lot of just sage advice for people getting into smaller card games, because we love them here. We just do. That,
Can
though,
make
I think...
a couple shout outs, just what a couple.
Oh, please. Yes, please. Shout out away.
Okay. For anybody who knows, I do variety streaming. I do a lot of Final Fantasy. I do video game stream. I'm trying to add to that content by adding board games and stuff. It's on the Draw Games on Twitch. I have a Discord. I'll happily share that with Dan if he'll share it.
Yes, it'll be both of those will be in the description for sure.
Shout outs to TCG Tacos. They do streaming of their locals. Gamers Command. They're a new store up in Florida, really pushing the kind of ready running radio. My buddy Michael Byrne does streaming for Final Fantasy content and locals. The FFTCG OTS podcast. They're a community based out in Canada, do variety content, do podcasts as well. RVA Returners, literally the knight of the community, runs free local tournaments every Wednesday on Octagon, which is a free-to-play, which has physical prize support. Mm-hmm. So if you want a low entry, which is free, and you want to win stuff, go play in their locals. They're literally doing this for the community. I mean, support support Maindeck. Give them some money in their Patreon. They are throwing tournaments for everything. And honestly, thank you for letting me talk on here. I had a lot of fun. I hope you did too. We
of course. Oh yeah, it was a blast. And we get all the shout outs out of the way. Are we?
Yeah, we're good.
I wasn't sure if there was like another list of every other content creator.
You know, Mom just looking me up here. Shout outs to this potato that I had I was eating dinner right before this thing, and this potato's been hanging out all lonely. Shout outs to this lonely potato.
Shout out to the potato.
Shout out to the potato, man.
All right, Gabe. Well, thank you so much. Thank you, Gabe, from On The Draw Games. Again, links for everything will be in the description, so go check that out. Make sure you follow Gabe on Twitch to catch all his sweet Final Fantasy and Pokemon TCG content and all other things he streams as well. And that is going to wrap up episode 25 of the Maindeck podcast. So a final shout out to our patrons, who I guess Gabe has made sure I shout out multiple times throughout here. Anyway, shout out himself. But thank you guys so much for your support. Your support makes everything we do possible and helps support our fantastic community of TCG players with our awesome giveaways and leagues. So links to Patreon and Discord and everything are also in the description. So if you're watching on YouTube, and if you're not watching on YouTube, they're probably nowhere there, but you can find them everywhere.
You can find them. It's like a scavenger. It's like, where's Waldo?
Yeah, exactly. All right, guys. I hope you guys have a wonderful night. Thanks so much for tuning in. Stay tuned. Our next episode will be, wait. It will be Pokemon. I think it's or is it Yu-Gi-Oh? It's either Pokemon or Yu-Gi-Oh. It's one of the last. We saved two of the last big three for the last two episodes. So you guys stay tuned for that. It'll be coming next week, and then the last one will be coming after that, either Pokemon or Yu-Gi-Oh. I can't remember what I set up already. And then finally, the big end of year podcast episode going over what we're looking forward to in 2023. And Gabe, I'm going to be talking a lot of Battle Spirits in that episode, so I hope you tune in and check that one out too. All right. Thank you again, Gabe. Thanks everyone for listening tonight. You guys have a wonderful night. We'll see you in the next one.
See ya.